The elevator smelled like lemon cleaner and old carpet. Theodore Marsh stepped in through the service entrance at 6:15 in the morning, the way he had every Tuesday and Friday for the past 8 months. He wore the same gray work shirt he always wore, the one with the small tear near the left pocket that he kept meaning to patch. His hands were rough. His boots were waterproof but not new. He pressed the button for the 14th floor and stood with his back against the wall, holding his supply caddy with both hands, watching the numbers climb. Nobody in the lobby ever looked at him. That was the nature of the job. You arrived before the important people woke up, and you left before they needed to notice you were gone. Theodore had learned this early, back when he first took the contract from Prism Residential Services. The company cleaned 12 buildings across the metro area. He covered 3 of them. He was 58 years old, recently divorced, and his daughter Ivy lived 40 minutes away in a suburb she'd chosen because the school district was good. He saw her on alternating weekends. He carried a photo of her in his wallet. The 14th floor was a single-unit floor. 1 apartment, the whole thing. That alone told you something about the person who lived there. Her name was Carolyn Voss. Theodore had never spoken with her directly, not in the beginning. The arrangement was handled through her personal assistant, a young man named Ben who sent PDF instructions and responded to messages within minutes, day or night. The instructions were specific. Clean Tuesdays and Fridays between 6 and 9 a.m. Do not enter the master bedroom unless the door is propped open. Use unscented products only. Leave the small desk near the window untouched. He followed the instructions. Carolyn Voss was not famous in the way celebrities are famous. But in certain rooms in certain cities, her name carried weight. She had built a logistics company from a single warehouse in Ohio 22 years ago. Now it moved pharmaceutical supplies across 14 states. She sat on 2 boards. She had been profiled in 3 national magazines. In the photos, she wore dark blazers and looked directly into the camera with an expression that was difficult to read. Not cold exactly, but measured. Like someone who had practiced composure until it became permanent. Theodore had seen those photos once, briefly, when Ben emailed him the building access packet. He hadn't thought much about them. He was there to clean. The first time he saw her in person, he almost didn't recognize her. It was a Tuesday in early March. He had let himself in with the key card at the usual time and started in the kitchen, which was his routine. She was sitting at the long dining table in a robe, both hands wrapped around a coffee mug looking out at the city. She didn't turn when he came in. He set down his caddy quietly and said, "Good morning," because that was what you said. She turned then. She looked at him for a moment the way people look at something they've forgotten they left out. "Good morning," she said. Her voice was lower than he expected, slower. There were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of careful living could fully conceal, and something in the way she held her shoulders told him she had been awake for a long time. He went to work. She stayed at the table. That was how it usually went. On most mornings she was gone before he arrived, or she appeared briefly, and then retreated to another part of the apartment. Occasionally she was still at the table when he finished. He would let himself out and that would be that. But Theodore noticed things. That was the nature of the job too, the part nobody talked about. You learned the textures of a person's life. The coffee mug she used every day but never seemed to finish. The reading glasses left face down on the kitchen counter. The medication lined up on the bathroom shelf. 3 prescriptions. Then 4, then 5 over the months he'd been coming. The kind of medication that made you wonder. He didn't wonder out loud. He cleaned the counters and the floors and the bathroom tiles and the tall windows that faced east, and he went home. But in the back of his mind, a small thing had lodged itself, a question without a shape yet. Carolyn Voss, according to what people said, was always sick. He had gathered this in fragments. A comment from Ben once, left casually in an email, "Miss Voss has a specialist appointment Friday morning. Please arrive no later than 6:30 so you're finished before 7. A phone call he overheard in passing, her voice thin and tight, saying, "I've already changed the meeting twice. I can't do it again. Just tell them I'll be there." The unopened boxes of herbal supplements stacked near the pantry door. The humidifier that ran in the hallway even in summer. She had a housekeeper once, a full-time one, who apparently had left after 6 months. Then a part-time nurse who came on Wednesdays. Then the nurse stopped coming too. Theodore wasn't sure what that meant. He didn't ask. What he did notice, gradually, The way you notice a smell that's been there longer than you realized was the quality of the air near the secondary balcony. The apartment had 2 balconies. The main one faced the skyline and was furnished with clean-lined outdoor chairs that never seemed to be used. The secondary balcony was smaller, tucked off the hallway near the guest room, and it faced north, toward a less interesting view of the building next door and a strip of street far below. There was a single wooden stool on that balcony. That was all. Theodore's instructions did not include the secondary balcony. Clean the main balcony surface on Fridays. That's what the PDF said. The secondary one wasn't mentioned, but he passed it every time he cleaned the hallway, and in late spring, around the time the windows started being left open a crack, he began to notice something. The smell was faint, familiar. He had grown up around it. His father had smoked 2 packs a day until a doctor showed him an X-ray and scared him straight at 63. Theodore himself had never smoked, but he knew the smell the way you know the smell of a house you grew up in. It didn't announce itself, it just existed in the air, slightly sweet and slightly stale, unmistakably itself. He didn't say anything. It wasn't his place. He cleaned the hallway and moved on. But the medication on the bathroom shelf kept growing. 5 prescriptions became 6. He noticed one of the new ones was for a bronchodilator. He knew what that was because his father had used one. It opened the airways. You used it when the airways didn't open on their own. He thought about that for a few days. Then he stopped thinking about it because it still wasn't his place. There was a morning in June when he arrived and found Carolyn Voss sitting not at the dining table, but on the floor of the living room, her back against the couch, her knees pulled up, her phone on the cushion beside her. She looked up when he came in. She didn't seem embarrassed. Exactly. More like someone caught in the middle of something they had no energy to explain. "I dropped it," she said, gesturing at the phone. "I was just resting before picking it up." Theodore set down his caddy and picked up the phone and handed it to her. "Thank you," she said. He noticed that her breathing was audible. Not labored, but present, a slight effortfulness that shouldn't have been there in someone simply sitting on the floor. He went to the kitchen and started his work. He was at the sink when he heard her talking on the phone, her voice tired but controlled, the way people sound when they have gotten used to performing wellness. "The results came back fine," she was saying. "Yes," the pulmonologist said, "everything looks normal. I know, I told you I'm fine." A pause. "Yes, I'll be at the board meeting. I'll be there." Theodore rinsed the sponge and moved to the countertops. He did not eavesdrop, but he had been in enough rooms to know when a person was not telling the whole truth. The particular flatness in the voice, the quickness to answer questions that hadn't yet been asked. "Everything looks normal," she had said. The pulmonologist said so. But she had a bronchodilator on her shelf, and she breathed with more effort than she should have. And the air near the secondary balcony told its own story. Theodore thought about his father. The X-ray. The doctor's voice going very quiet in that specific way. Doctors' voices go quiet. The years his father had spent convinced that the coughing was just a winter thing, a dry air thing, a nothing thing. He finished cleaning and let himself out. He sat in his car in the parking garage for longer than usual. He had no right to say anything. He was the cleaning service. He was paid to clean and not to notice, and he had already done more noticing than was appropriate. If he said something and he was wrong, he would lose the contract. If he said something and he was right, he might still lose the contract, because nobody wants the man who scrubs their bathroom floor to see them clearly. He thought about Ivy, who was 9 years old and had recently taken up drawing. She drew horses mostly, and sometimes dogs, and once she had drawn a picture of him that made him look like a very kind potato which he had taped to his refrigerator. He thought about what he would tell her if someone knew something that might help her, and said nothing. He started the car and went home. He came back Friday. On Fridays he had a different rhythm to his cleaning. He covered the main balcony, did a deeper clean of the kitchen, changed out the bathroom linens if new ones were set out. On this particular Friday, Carolyn Voss was not home. Ben had sent a note the night before. "Miss Voss has an early obligation. You'll have the space to yourself. Please make sure the west-facing windows are wiped down. There's been condensation." Theodore wiped down the windows. He cleaned the kitchen thoroughly. He changed the linens. Then, because the secondary balcony was adjacent to the hallway he was already cleaning, and because the sliding door had been left 2 inches open in a way that pulled at his attention, he looked out. The wooden stool was there. On the floor beside it, wedged between the stool leg and the railing, was a small glass ashtray, mostly clean, with a thin residue at its center that was unmistakable. Next to it, a lighter, tucked just behind the railing post, where the shadow fell and where you wouldn't see it at a glance, was a pack of cigarettes partially crushed with 3 left in it. Theodore looked at this arrangement for a moment. He thought about the pulmonologist who said everything looked normal. He thought about the bronchodilator. He thought about the fact that a specialist could only assess what they were told, and that smoking in private was, by definition, the thing you did not tell your specialist. He pulled the door closed and went back to cleaning. That evening he sat at his kitchen table with a glass of water and thought about how to say something without not it becoming something it wasn't supposed to be. He was not her friend. He was not her doctor. He was not her family. He was a man who came twice a week to clean her apartment. The line between noticing and intruding was thin, and he had already noticed far more than his job required. But there was the breathing. There were the 6 prescriptions. There was the fact that she had told her family and her colleagues, and probably her doctors, that she was fine, everything was fine. He thought about a specific thing his own father had said, years later, after the X-ray and the quitting and the slow rebuilding of his lungs. I would have stopped sooner if anyone had just asked me directly. Not lectured, not frightened me. Just asked me if I was doing okay and waited for the real answer. Theodore wrote nothing down. He didn't rehearse anything. He went to bed and in the morning got up and went to his other buildings and did his work. The following Tuesday he arrived at his usual time. He let himself in. He set his caddy down in the kitchen. Carolyn Voss was at the dining table again, the coffee mug in both hands, looking east. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she said. He started on the kitchen. He worked slowly the way he always did, with the methodical steadiness of someone who had long since stopped needing to rush. After about 15 minutes, when he had moved to the countertops near the dining area, and was close enough that conversation didn't require any particular effort, he said, without turning around, "Miss Voss, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know I'm asking because I've been doing this job a long time and I'm not someone who talks." A pause from the table. "All right," she said. He kept working. He kept his voice even. "I've noticed you're not well, not in a general way. I mean specifically. The breathing, the medication situation on the bathroom shelf. I've noticed the secondary balcony." He paused. He chose his next words carefully. "I'm not here to make you feel judged. I just want to ask if you're doing okay." The real answer, the silence that followed, was long enough that he began to think he had miscalculated entirely. He finished the counter section and moved to the sink without looking at her. Then she said very quietly, "How long have you known?" "A few months." Another silence. He heard her set the mug down. "Does Ben know?" "No." "Do you talk to other residents?" "No, you're just..." She stopped. She started again. "You just noticed." "Yes," he said, "I notice things. It's the nature of the job." When he finally turned around to move to the next area, he saw that she was looking at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her before. Not the composed, camera-ready steadiness he'd associated with her. Something else. Something that looked like the relief you feel when you've been holding your breath for a very long time and someone has finally noticed. "My father smoked for decades," Theodore said. He stopped when it became something he couldn't hide from himself anymore. He used to say he wasted 15 years because he confused keeping a secret with having control. Carolyn said nothing, but she didn't look away. "I'm not going to say anything to anyone," Theodore said. "That's not why I'm telling you. I just thought..." He moved to retrieve his caddy. "I thought you should know that someone had noticed and wasn't afraid to say so." He cleaned the bathroom. He cleaned the hallway. He wiped down the west-facing windows, which were still slightly condensed at the edges. He worked in silence, and she stayed at the table in silence, and the apartment was very quiet in the particular way that apartments are quiet when something important has just been said. When he was nearly finished, gathering his supplies near the front door, she spoke from the table without turning around. "My pulmonologist told me the imaging was clean. It is clean for now." A beat. "I've been telling myself that means there's time." Theodore picked up his caddy. "There usually is time," he said. "Until there isn't." He let himself out. The following Friday, Ben sent an email asking him to please use the back hallway closet for his supplies going forward, as Ms. Voss wanted to reorganize the kitchen storage area. It was a small change, entirely practical. But Ben also noted at the end of the email that Ms. Voss had said Theodore was to be given extended access privileges and could contact her assistant directly for any scheduling needs rather than going through the main Prism residential line. Theodore filed the email and didn't read anything into it that wasn't there. He arrived Friday as usual. The apartment was quiet. He started in the kitchen. He noticed on the bathroom shelf that the arrangement of medication had changed slightly. The bronchodilator was still there. But beside it, on a small piece of paper folded in half, was the name of a doctor and a phone number. A specialist Theodore didn't recognize. He didn't look at it long enough to memorize it. It wasn't his to memorize. On the secondary balcony, the stool was there. The ashtray was gone. He thought about that for a moment, standing in the hallway. Then he moved on to the windows. Weeks passed. He came Tuesdays and Fridays. Carolyn Voss was sometimes home, sometimes not. When she was home, they spoke occasionally. Nothing long, nothing heavy. The small words of two people who had arrived at a quiet understanding. She asked once about Ivy, because she had noticed the photo that had slipped partway out of his wallet while he was unpacking his supply caddy. He told her about the horses and the dogs and the very kind potato. She smiled, a real one, the kind that doesn't get practiced in front of cameras. He noticed, over those weeks, that her breathing had changed, not dramatically, not overnight, but it was different, slightly quieter, slightly less effortful. She moved through the apartment with something closer to ease. She didn't mention it. He didn't mention it. There was nothing to say. Or rather, there was, and they both already knew it. One morning in late September, she was at the dining table when he arrived, and there was a second mug on the table. It took him a moment to understand that it was for him. "I never asked if you drink coffee," she said. "I do," he said. He sat down, because it seemed like she wanted him to. They drank their coffee and looked out at the city, which in late September was doing that particular thing it did when the angle of the light changed, turning the buildings from gray to something closer to gold. "I have an appointment next week," she said. "The real kind, where I tell them everything." Theodore nodded. "Good," he said. "I should have done it a long time ago." "Probably," he said. "But you're doing it now." She looked at her coffee. "I've been thinking about why it took this long, I think." She paused. "I think I told myself that controlling the secret was the same as controlling the problem. And if I controlled the problem, it didn't have to be real." Theodore thought about his father. He thought about the X-ray and the doctor's quiet voice and the 15 wasted years. "People do that," he said. "The smartest ones especially." She laughed quietly, without much humor in it. But it was a laugh. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "Take it however you want," he said. He finished his coffee. He picked up his caddy. He said good morning, and she said good morning, and he went to work, cleaning the kitchen in the early light while she sat at the table and, for the first time in a long time, probably, let herself think about what she was going to say when someone finally asked her the right question, and she was ready to answer with the real truth. He never told anyone what he knew. Not Ben, not the building manager, not anyone from Prism Residential. He came Tuesdays and Fridays. He cleaned thoroughly and quietly, and he noticed things because that was the nature of the job. He noticed when the secondary balcony stopped smelling like anything at all. He noticed when the medication shelf was rearranged and 2 of the older prescriptions disappeared and 1 new one appeared, the kind used in a formal cessation program. He noticed when her breathing became the quiet, unremarkable thing that breathing is supposed to be. None of it was his to announce. He simply knew, the way you know things that happen slowly and honestly in front of you. If you are the kind of person who pays attention and keeps what you see to yourself and shows up, consistently, at 6:15 in the morning and does the work. The photo of Ivy stayed in his wallet. The potato drawing stayed on his refrigerator. He drove his old car to 3 buildings twice a week, and he did his job and he said good morning to people who mostly didn't look at him. And he was, in the way that mattered, at peace with all of it. Some things don't need an audience. Some things just need one person who notices and doesn't look away.